ends with a feast. Easter Sunday, everyone dresses up again, and children hunt for brightly colored Easter eggs. They knock them together in a game called Yudakis. Traditional foods eaten during Lebanese holidays are kusa, or stuffed zucchini, and grape leaves, which are stuffed with rice and meat. Tabbouleh is a common Lebanese salad made of parsley and cracked wheat. Muslims in Lebanon celebrate a holiday called Eid al-Fitr. It ends the holy month of Ramadan with a feast similar to Thanksgiving. It literally means the festival of fast breaking because it is the end of fasting that goes on during Ramadan. During Ramadan, nobody is allowed to eat or drink anything from sunrise to sunset. As this month comes to a close, Muslims get very excited. Once the month is over, everybody gets up and dresses in their best clothes, have a big breakfast, and go to the mosque. Some women and children even paint traditional patterns on their hands. After everyone goes to the mosque, the feast begins and everyone gives thanks to God.
Lebanon is a place of high religious tension. A little over half of the population is Muslim, while the rest are Christian. That's the belief anyway, because no official census has been taken. In the late 1960s, Palestinian refugees came to Lebanon. They were believed to move there because of the 1967 Arab-Israel War and Black Sunday in Jordan 1970. Many difficulties arose over their presence and added to the increasing religious tension that was already present within the country. The spark that ignited the civil war in Lebanon occurred in Beirut on April 13, 1975, when gunmen killed 4 Phalangists during an attempt on Pierre Jumail's life. Perhaps believing the assassin to have been Palestinian, the Phalangists retaliated later that day by attacking a bus carrying Palestinian passengers across a Christian neighborhood, killing about 26 of the occupants. The next day, fighting erupted in earnest, with Phalangists pitted against Palestinian militiamen. The confessional layout of Beirut's various quarters facilitated random killing. Most Beirutis stayed inside their homes during these early days of battle, and few imagined that the street fighting they were witnessing was the beginning of a war that was to devastate their city and divide their country. The Lebanese government under Rashid was unable to reach an agreement over what to do about the expanding war. They were split over whether or not the army should be used to halt the bloodshedding. The fighting, however, continued to spread rapidly. The strikes would move to places with mixed populations, forcing people to go to their side, far more popular race, where their religious was more popular. An obvious rift began to form, dividing the sides of the conflict in Lebanon. Although the two warring factions were often characterized as Christian versus Muslim, their individual composition was far more complex. Those in favor of maintaining the status quo came to be known as the Lebanese Front. The groups included primarily the Maronite militias of the Jumail, Shamoun, and Frangiba clans, often led by the Sons of Zalama. Also in this camp were various militias of Maronite religious orders. The side seeking change is usually referred to as the Lebanese National Movement. It was far less cohesive and organized. For the most part, it was led by Kamal Jublat and included a variety of militias of leftist organizations and guerrillas from rejectionist Palestinian organizations. The fighting continued, and Syria began to intervene with peace conferences. However, many of these conferences were compromised by Lebanese Front and Palestinian confrontation. They did create a 17-point document to further any kind of peace that was left. It was regarded as a breakthrough for the time, however, it was soon derailed by the Lebanese army. The Lebanese Front had very bad fortunes and began to decline. Meanwhile, the Lebanese National Movement's army was increasing rapidly. Syria became aware that the possible outcomes to this war which resulted in a victory for the Lebanese national movement, were unacceptable, according to the Syrian President Assad anyway. At the end of May 1976, Syria intervened militarily against the Lebanese national movement, hoping to end the fighting swiftly. This decision, however, proved ill-conceived as Syrian forces met heavy resistance and suffered many casualties. Decision, however, proved ill-conceived as Syrian forces met heavy resistance and suffered many casualties. Moreover, by entering the conflict on the Christian side, Syria provoked an outrage from much of the Arab world. Despite, or perhaps as a result from, these military and diplomatic failures, in late July, Syria decided to quell the resistance. A drive was launched against the Lebanese national movement strongholds. This was far more successful than any earlier battles. Within 2 weeks, the opposition was almost subdued. Rather than crush the resistance altogether, at this time, Syria chose to participate in the Arab Peace Conference held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, on October 16, 1976. The Riyadh Conference, followed by an Arab League meeting in Cairo, also in October 1976, formally ended the Lebanese Civil War. Although the underlying causes were in no way eliminated, the full-scale war had stopped. Syria's presence in Lebanon was legitimated by the establishment of the Arab Deterrent Force by the Arab League in 1976. In January 1977, the ADF consisted of 13,000 men, of whom 27,000 were Serbians. Thus, after more than 1.5 years of devastation, relative calm had returned to Lebanon. Although the exact cost of the war will never be known, deaths have approached 44,000, with about 180,000 wounded. Many thousands of others were displaced, or left homeless, or had migrated. Much of the once magnificent city of Beirut was reduced to rubble, and the town divided into Muslim and Christian sectors, separated by the so-called Green Line. The tension still existed, and there were still Israel and Syrian troops occupying parts of Lebanon. On May 17, 1983, Lebanon, Israel, and the United States signed an agreement on Israeli withdrawal that was conditional on the departure of Syrian troops. Syria opposed the agreement and declined to discuss the withdrawal of its troops, effectively stalemating further progress. In August 1983, Israel withdrew from the Shuf, thus removing the buffer between the Druze and the Christian militias, and triggering another round of brutal fighting. The Druze fought the Christians and took most of the Shuf. Then the collapse of the Lebanese army in 1984, following the defection of many Muslim and Druze units to militias, severely hurt the government's power. The Lebanese government then canceled the agreement made on May 17. Between 1985 and 1989, factional conflict worsened as various efforts at national reconciliation failed. Heavy fighting took place in the War of Camps in 1985 and 1986, as the Shia Muslim Amal militia sought to root the Palestinians from Lebanese strongholds. Division furthered when President Gamal's term of office expired in 1988. Before stepping down, he had appointed another Maronite Christian Lebanese Armed Forces Commanding General, Michael Aoun, as acting Prime Minister, contravening Lebanon's unwritten national pact, which required the Prime Minister to be Sunni Muslim. Muslim groups rejected the move and pledged support to Salam al-Haus, a Sunni. Lebanon was thus divided between a Christian government in East Beirut and a Muslim government in West Beirut, both with no president. The Taif Agreement of 1989 marked the beginning of the end of the war. In January of that year, a committee appointed by the Arab League, chaired by Kuwait and including Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and Morocco, had begun to formulate solutions to the conflict, leading to a meeting of Lebanese parliamentaries in Taif, Saudi Arabia, where they agreed to the National Reconciliation Accord in October. Returning to Lebanon, they ratified the agreement on November 4th and elected Renee Mowat as president